I think the most rewarding part of my job is being part of an experience, being able to say, you know, I was there and I was part of that. And it's a memory that I'll keep. It doesn't matter, you know, how much money you make doing this. You can blow that money, but you can't blow those memories. Those memories stay with you forever. You know, I can say that as a recording engineer, I was part of one of the biggest selling Latin records of all time, which is Willie Colon and Ruben Blades, Siembras. So that it goes down as one of the most selling LPs of all time. I will remember how that production took place in a recording studio, and I'll be proud of being part of that for the rest of my life.
So today is Thursday, March 14th, 2024. Who are we speaking with?
You're speaking to Kevin Zambrana.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born here in New York City, in the South Bronx. I was born and raised in the South Bronx and then made my way to Queens, yes.
What part of the South Bronx?
Oh, 141st Street, Willis Avenue.
Oh, I know exactly where that is.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. What kind of music did you hear around the house growing up?
Quite a vast variety of music. My parents had me when they were 40 years old, so I was honored to be exposed to classic Puerto Rican music of many genres. I mean, they exposed me to the things that were pre-salsa, pre-mambo, pre all that, you know? And so I had that ability to engulf all that music.
And then talk to us about the transition of being a music. What was the first record that you bought?
First record I bought, good question. As a young man, I played percussion, and there were several artists who, like Ralph McDonald and people who I followed as percussionists, Ayrton, Flora Purim, people from Brazil, people from all over the world who had incredible talents of playing percussion, and I wanted to learn the vast world of rhythm. But you know, I think some of the early stuff that I still have was disco music. It was Latin music. It was all that was around me.
And then talk to us about the transition to going to nightclubs. Do you remember the first club you went to?
Huh. You know, I've been working since I was 11 years old. So anywhere I went was to work. And the Copacabana was definitely one of the first clubs that I went to. I remember being young and working in a recording studio and trying to get into clubs that the artists that I was recording were at. But because I was 16 or 17 years old, I was never allowed in.
Oh. So let's get into it. What is the Copacabana for people who don't know?
The Copacabana is the world's most famous club. Its name is synonymous. It's everything that you would think of in what is an American nightclub.
And when did you start working at the Copa?
Ooh, my first, wow, it's hard to say. In 1981, I actually performed in the Copacabana with a group known as GQ. I was the percussionist of that group. And in the same year, I was called to the Copacabana because I was already an established audio engineer in the Latin world to go there and take care of some problems that were going on.
What kind of problems?
Oh, funny enough, in 1981, I had a rehearsal studio, recording studio, and the legendary promoter, Ralph Mercado, called me. He says, Kevin, I have a problem. I said, what's your problem? He says, well, I hired Eddie Palmieri after not speaking to him for so many years and not hiring him, and he just walked off the stage. I said, what happened? He says, he can't hear his piano. I said, oh my God. He says, you don't know, they're about to riot in here. I need for you to come over here and take care of this. So I ran over there, and Eddie Palmieri was backstage, and I saw him letting the manager know and saying, if you think this is easy, take a pair of maracas, shake your ass on stage and see if they're gonna like it. And I went out and took two Fender twin amplifiers, put left and right of the piano he was playing. It was an electronic piano. And he got on stage and he just killed it. He just, the place just fell apart. And from then on, it's been a lifelong friendship with Eddie Palmieri and everyone else in the business. And that's how it started at the Copacabana.
Wow, what a story. What a story. Um, so many ways to go. Let's take a step back. How did you develop your sound engineer chops?
Well, it's funny because I was 16 years old at the time, and I wanted to become a professional percussionist. And I was in high school, and there was an internship program. And this internship program offered young people like me some kind of a job of the future. So you looked at a list, and there was a list of a recording studio. And I said, wow, this is my opportunity to be around professional musicians. And what happened was that I got into this internship, got the spot, and I fell in love with audio engineering.
Wow. Can you describe the original sound system setup when you took over at the Copacabana?
Well, the Copacabana 60th Street was the original Copacabana, and the owners then had taken that place over, and it was wow, it was quite interesting. There were JBL speakers that are no longer made. I mean, they were antique. There was Macintosh amplifiers, which, by the way, I still have some in my inventory from way back then. And it was a cabaret system, and it was one suffice enough to cover that room. They had two floors then, and it was way back in the day. These things are like collectibles now.
Mm. And how has the sound system evolved over at the Copacabana?
Well, that's a good question because I had a lot to do with that. In 60th Street, there were old speakers, there were old amplifiers. It worked fine. They moved out of 60th Street, and their next location was 57th Street. 57th Street had a system in there because it had been a club prior to that. And so when I got in there, it was a system that had wow, it was it was the norm for what was known as a club system then, where you had different components flown to make an entire system. It had a lens tweeters, it had big old lens tweeters, it had mid-range, it had sub-mid. It was different cabinets that were built into the club. And then it was my job to upgrade it to what was more modern and happening then.
Wow. In terms of maintaining equipment, what's the proper way to maintain equipment for a club of that magnitude? Do you have doubles of everything in the basement? Do you do fine tuning every week or every month or every year? Like, how does that work?
In the club scene, um, you rise to the occasion. They have a big night and things get blown out, and you have to just get it repaired right then and there. Yes, you hope to have backups. You hope to have convinced the owners that they need to buy 4 and 6 of each component, but obviously they all work on a budget. So you rose to the occasion and you fix it overnight, and here we go for another night.
Wow. What were some of the challenges you faced with the sound system in the early days?
Well, some of the challenges was first of all having the owners agree to a budget, agree that even though half of the system was working, that wasn't enough. You had to convince them that, listen, you got to go 100% with this, and we have to get this done now. And fortunately, the owners of the Copacabana, they went along with a lot what I had said. I had proven to them that I can make this work, and so we were able to keep things always afloat in the Copacabana. And as we went from venue to new venue to new venue, things got upgraded, and we went along with the progression of the technology.
Mm. Uh, Can you walk us through the process of setting up sound for a live performance?
Oh, sure. I mean, in the Copacabana, for instance, the greatest Latin bands of all time perform, as well as other acts as we transform into what was hip hop and what became the most popular genres of the time. And, a typical Latin night, we would get in before we open, we have to set up a number of microphones for the instrumentation and check monitors and stuff like that. But there was no sound check. The band came in and was ready to perform, and you had to be ready to deliver.
Wow. And how do the acoustics of the Copacabana affect your sound engineering?
Acoustics are very important. In the last Copacabana we had, uh, which is at 47th Street, which was a China club previously to that. Part of my design was to also design the acoustics of the venue. Acoustics are very important. The sound system will not sound proper unless the acoustics are proper. And so I designed the acoustical panels that went around the entire club. And it was warm. It was nice and comfortable to be in there. It wasn't harsh. It was something that you can go into a club and say, I can sit in this corner and have a conversation.
Mm. And what are some of the most memorable technical issues you had to solve during a show?
Oh, anything goes, anything happens. I remember at the 57th Street, the sound system was actually the mixer was actually on a motor. It flew from the ceiling, and yeah, and you would bring it down on a motor to service, and you bring it back up in position to mix the show. Well, one day that motor went bad, and this thing came down right in the middle of the dance floor, and wouldn't go back up. So that was the beginning of a change. Things like this have to happen for owners and managers to realize there's something wrong with the design here. We have to fix it. And
Mhm.
so that went down, and lo and behold, we got to actually build a good basket up there where I sat and mixed the shows at the 57th Street location.
How did you balance the sound levels between the music and the audience?
The audience, the way you gauge that is the ambience level. In other words, the audience could be loud or they could be quiet. During these eras, people jam packed these clubs, Copacabana, and the ambience level is loud. So you had to have a strong enough sound system to combat that ambience level and give them exactly what they wanted.
Mm. And did the Copa have a signature sound or audio effect that set it apart?
The Copa, as we left 57th Street, went on to 34th Street, which is the biggest Copa till today. They were good enough to go along with my design that was put together with JBL. And it was quite a big place. It handled, in one evening, 5,000 people could go through there, even though capacity was more like 3,000. And so it was immense, the systems on both floors. It was well engineered, it was well installed, well designed.
What kind of microphones were preferred by the performers at the club?
Oh, the microphones, were my choice, and obviously common microphones that were used for there, like Shure 58, Shure 57s, some other condenser microphones. You needed a rugged mic. You needed a mic that would handle everyday use, and those were common choices.
And then how did you adapt the sound system for different genres of music?
Well, different genre of music, require different types of microphone setups. They require different types of monitor setups. But the system that you installed and designed had to be able to handle all these genres.
Mm. Were there any innovations in sound technology that the Copa adopted early?
I would say the highest tech system that was put in the various copas was the one at 34th Street, where we put a line array, and the line array became the way to go with sound systems. And so there was a budget in a beautiful new club to put together that would compete with all other clubs in New York.
Mm. And then how did you manage feedback and other sound issues in such a live environment?
Feedback is created by microphones and speakers colliding with each other. And it's important that when you set up and you tune up the monitor so that they don't feedback with the microphones, that you have a good starting point. But the rest has got to do with the artist and the way he uses the mic. So sometimes you got to tell an artist, don't drop the mic in front of the monitor. Don't cup the mic. Don't do these kind of things, and we'll have a good night.
Mm. Did the club have a dedicated sound engineer team, and then how was that structured?
Yeah, that team was put together by me. I was the head engineer, and I had some other guys who would also engineer there as well. But that went on. I was there. Wow, from 30 years. How's that?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So you saw all the different incarnations.
Yes, I went from the original Copa to 60th Street to 57th Street to 34th Street, and the last hurrah was the location at 47th Street.
Is it still around, or is it closed?
It's closed.
Hmm.
They what they've done is that the old man John Giuliano, he's got a Copacabana night at another establishment. So they call it the Copacabana night on Saturdays, but this is an establishment that was open already. So he sort of, planting himself there and still call it the Copacabana night every Saturday. You can go there and still feel that kind of thing.
Got it. How did you handle sound checks before performances?
There were rarely any sound checks.
Really?
Yes, rarely any sound checks, especially with the Latin bands. They would come in and they say, well, they got the guy that's going to make this sound good. Let's go.
Wow.
Very rarely there was a sound check, yes.
Uh, let's see here. Uh, what are common sound engineering mistakes you see or hear when you go out and you're not working at other venues?
Preparation is everything. If you don't tune that system up, if you don't know how to set that system up, if you don't prepare yourself for anything that could go wrong, you're going to have a bad day.
Mm. Do you have a memory of a performance at the Copa or multiple where you were like, wow, this is it. This is why I do this?
Oh, there are many memories. Wow. I remember one that comes to my mind right now. Oscar de Leon is one of the greatest salsa artists of all time. He's from Venezuela. He never travels without his band. His band is second to none. And Celia Cruz had just died, and he got on stage and he dedicated that show to her, and even cried during the performance.
Wow. Wow. Um, which performance had the most complex sound setup?
Wow, I mean, we've did a lot of things at the Copacabana. One that stands out is that we did a couple of live recordings that became records, and they're more complicated because I'm mixing live music in a venue, and there's a truck outside that is recording this piece in multi-track. So it's up to me not to ruin that piece by not allowing feedback or anything bad to go wrong. Those are complicated situations. You're not just working yourself to make the venue sound well. You're recording. You're part of a recording team, and you must make sure that you don't harm their recording while this live presentation is happening.
Hmm. Did any performers have unique or unusual sound requests?
Some performers know what they're talking about. Some performers are trying to they're trying to get to something. Um, it's a matter of what's happening that day. Is he on or is she off? How are we gonna work this out today? We gotta make this happen.
How would you accommodate the needs of a big band versus a solo artist?
Well, all the salsa bands were big bands. So I came from the recording studio. I started young. in a recording studio, and I had the training of multiple mic setups. And, salsa orchestras are 11, 12 deep, And so when you start off in a recording studio, you get to really look at things with a magnifying glass, and you know how to separate the musicians, and you know how to multi-mic an orchestra. It's an advantage, and you want that to transpire in the outcome of the final sound.
Were there any impromptu performances that took you by surprise, where a celebrity just showed up unannounced and they wanted to get on stage?
Oh, it happens. It's happened many times, sure.
Give
You
us some
have,
examples, and then how did you accommodate them?
wow, let's see if I can remember some here now. I mean, there were many, many nights where, artists would be performing and people just jump up and want to sing with them. I remember Mark Anthony being in the audience and with his wife then, which was Diana Torres, Miss Universe. And, someone's performing on stage and Mark, come on, and he just jumps up there and, and starts to sing with the artist. And this is quite, that happened quite often at the Copacabana because it was the place to be. And any artists that had come from out of town and came in, other artists would come to see them perform and bring them onto the stage. And, it was nice. It's really nice.
How did you ensure that the VIP area had good sound?
Well, you have to make sure that the entire club is sounding well. So when you design a system for a club like which I designed with JBL at 34th Street, every inch of the club has to sound right. There has to be proper dispersion of the entire sound system, so nobody walks away saying, I was in a dark corner, I didn't hear anything.
Mm. How did your role as a sound engineer change over the 30 years you worked at the club? What was it when you started, and how did it differ when you ended?
Well, when you start, they tell you what to do. When they realize you know what you're doing, now you're telling them what they got to do. You got to spend some money. It's not working.
That's great. That's great. Um, how did the shift from live performances to recorded music affect your job?
Well, the recorded music of the DJs, they're all the greatest DJs, did their jobs at the Copacabana, and they had to provide the rest of the music that the live band did not provide, and so they were the heroes of the evening when they provided the rest of the music that people really needed in order to complete their their music for the evening.
Mm. And how did you stay updated with the latest sound engineering technologies?
Oh, you go to conventions, you go to all these things, you read, you know what's coming up, you know what's hot, and now it's your job to convince the owners that now you need this new car. That last car, won the last race, but now we need a new car to win the new race.
Do you have a favorite memory of working at the Copa?
Many, many. Um, wow. Yeah, there were many memories. Jeez, so many, magical nights of artists who performed and did things that you know won't happen again. Many artists throughout the years. There so many, so many things happen in the club in that when you look back, you say, "Oh my goodness!" I saw people die. I saw people get shot. I mean, it's.
Oh, wait, whoa. Let's go back. Let's go back. Let's go back. Let's go back. Tell us one of each of those stories.
Well, one of the clubs that was big was not the Copacabana. Um, it was on 14th Street, and it was the Palladium. And I was the production coordinator for that place. And I remember one night where on my walkie-talkie I could hear, "Oh, he got shot! He got shot!" And I run to the front door and I see that one of the bouncers, which I knew, had gotten shot, and he was down on the floor. And they brought him into the coat room and they said, "Hang on there, hang on there. You're gonna make it." He didn't make it. He got killed, and I saw him die in front of me. And so these things happen. This is what happens in New York City and it's happened in the club scene much too often. I didn't know one day I would experience seeing that happen, but that happened.
Wow. What advice would you give to someone aspiring to be a sound engineer in a nightclub?
I would, to all the young gentlemen and young ladies who have worked for me and have come up, my thing is dedication. I say to them, listen, I've been doing this for over 40 years. And my first lesson to them is that there's 24 hours in a day. Don't tell me that you're going to make this a part-time job, because that's not going to work. Okay. If you're really serious about this or anything you do, you shouldn't eat this 24/7. Okay. And you make sure that you study and you practice and you don't waste any moment from learning this craft from anybody who's a craftsman in this piece already. And you'll get somewhere. In a club, it doesn't matter where. But if you're dedicated to your craft and furthering it, you'll get somewhere.
What was the most rewarding part of your job?
I think the most rewarding part of my job is being part of an experience, being able to say, I was there and I was part of that. And it's a memory that I'll keep. It doesn't matter, how much money you make doing this. You can blow that money, but you can't blow those memories. Those memories stay with you forever. I can say that as a recording engineer, I was part of one of the biggest selling Latin records of all time, which is Willie Colon and Ruben Blades, Siembras. So that it goes down as one of the most selling LPs of all time. I will remember how that production took place in a recording studio, and I'll be proud of being part of that for the rest of my life.
Mm. Let's talk about mentors. Did you have a mentor when you were coming up?
I sure did. His name was John Fausti, and he passed away just a couple of years ago. Wow, not even a couple of years ago, just over a year ago. John Fausti was my first mentor, and I was 16 years old, and I was, like I said, in an internship program from high school. And I chose an opening at a recording studio because for me, it meant that I'll be around professional musicians, and I was an aspiring percussionist. So I said, man, I'm going to learn from these professional musicians in a recording studio. Lo and behold, I got the bug of becoming an assistant audio engineer in a recording studio, and John Fausti was my master.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, John just passed not long ago, and he was quite a legend. He recorded, wow, I mean, hundreds of albums. He was one of the best audio engineers of Latin music there was, but he not only did Latin, he did rock, he did everything. And record labels like Fania Records would have never became Fania Records without the talents of John Fausti.
You worked at many different iterations and locations of the Copa. How did the club's clientele change over the years at the different locations?
It changed because of age. Okay, the classic Copacabana client, great dancer, got old. I'm 63 years old, and they were older than me, and so the Copacabana went from being, from having this particular crowd able to pay for and finance and continue the operation, to them not being able to anytime anymore go and spend that kind of money, as the cost of living and inflation and the cost of running a club goes up. So what happens is that now we are entertaining the reggaeton and the youngsters who do spend money, and it is the number one selling Latin piece out there at that moment. So the beauty of the Copacabana is that they never forgot their folks that put them on the map. So a Tuesday would always continue with these folks. It was a budget Tuesday. You get a free meal, you get in for cheap money, and you get to do what you've always done at the Copacabana. And maybe a Friday or Saturday was not your cup of tea anymore, because now the youngsters came in and we had one floor of hip hop and another floor of Latin and, you know, house and whatever else we had to do.
Mm. How did you manage the transition from analog to digital sound systems?
Digital sound systems, you know, the invention of digital sound system, the first component is the mixer. We went from analog mixers to digital mixers. The digital mixers didn't take up such real estate. So, you know, the club owners liked it because now they can sell more asses and seats. You can put more seats out, you know, and they have this humongous board taking up too much space, you know?
What was the most difficult genre to mix live at the club?
You know, it's 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 the circumstance that makes it difficult. It's an artist that doesn't come prepared. It's an artist that doesn't listen to you. It's you know, it may be a bad day for an engineer. You know, that's what makes it difficult. This is a how would I say, this is a calculation that is done by, okay, what are your requirements? You look at their contract, you know what their requirements are. They want these type of microphones, these type of monitors. And if you fit the requirement, now it's the exercise. Now you and I got to get along and make this happen.
Mm. Did you develop any personal relationships with the artists that you mixed?
Oh, yeah, I've had the honor of working with greats throughout the years from way back then. You know, we just mentioned Eddie Palmieri earlier. Um, he is a dear friend. I became friend of the family. Um, Matter of fact, he's going to perform on the 25th at the Blue Note. I've already got that in my calendar. I got to go out and see him. Um, yeah, along the way, you know, I was a young man, and I I was 16 and 17 years old when I started. So, you know, people like Willie Colon took me under their wing, and they became my older brothers and sisters. You know, and that was very important for me because as before I got into this, I used to look at them as Goliath, you know, somebody that's so big that I can't touch. And when I got to meet them and work with them, they adopted me, and I became a family member. And so I realized, wow, these are real people. They're humble. They take care of me, and I take care of them. And you know, so I've had the honor of working with them and becoming friends with many artists, you know, that are big and are still big and are legends. And you know, but as a young naive kid, I never really looked at them as, you know, I never was starstruck. You know, I was too naive, and I just got adopted. And it's like, what are you talking about? He's like my brother, you know.
Mm.
So it's kind of weird, you know, but that's how it transpired.
You've seen, worked with, and done sound for tons of artists. In your opinion, what qualities distinguish a truly great live performer?
A truly great live performer wants to do a sound check. He's prepared. He has a group that is so well rehearsed that anything that artist does on stage, they react to. You know, we spoke about Oscar de Leon. His group's from Venezuela. He's always had such a tight group, and I also got to work with him in the recording studio in the beginning as well. And he has such a tight group that anything he does, if he flings his hand, if he blinks, they know what to do. This is what you call an artist who's connected with his band. This is the full package, okay? And you know, they're well trained, and they don't do mistakes. They don't play too loud, you know. They're, you know, they know what to do, you know. And for that, when you have a group like that that's very well prepared, it's a walk in the park that night. These guys are not gonna play too loud. They're not gonna mistreat the equipment. They're gonna do their thing, and you know, I'm just a mere amplification of what they are. So if
Mm.
they give me the best, it's just gonna sound the best.
Mm. Let's talk about behind the scenes. It's Friday night. The Copa is at its peak, whatever year that was, say 1985, 1988, whatever. Describe a typical day in the life for you. Like, what time do you get to the club? What do you do? How do you prepare? How do you spend your time? What are you having your team do? Um, do you have dinner there? Do you go out to, do you set everything up and then go out to other clubs just to see what's happening? What time do you go home? Like, give us a day in the life of a sound engineer at the Copa.
Sure, if the Copa opened up on a Friday, let's say at 9 p.m., the engineer has to get there um, that evening 2 hours ahead of time, at least 6 or 7 p.m. He's got to set up the sound system. He's got to bring out all the mics, set them up, test them, make sure they're not feeding back in the monitors. You actually have to tune them up. You have to go through everything and make sure everything's as close as possible, because that band's not going to come in and do a sound check. They're going to get on that stage and they're going to want this to be from 1 to 9, from 1 to 10. They want this to be a 9, and so you have to prepare and make that work. You set all this up. If you got to get a sandwich or whatever you got to get after that, you do so. You know, and they'll walk in to perform at 11 p.m. that night. They'll get in, and you're going to bring them to the stage. They're going to get up there and they're going to do a little line check while music is playing, which is impossible to get it right, because you got a DJ playing and now you're testing the mic while all this music is going on. Okay, I think it's okay. Let's go. Let's do this. And so pretty much your first song is your sound check. And as that first song goes in, you have to take care of any feedback, anything that's wrong, make any adjustments, so that by the end of that song, they're confident and you have a good show.
How closely would you collaborate with the lighting crew and other backstage teams?
Yeah, the lighting crew, I was a production company, so I hired the lighting engineers, and you would give them an insight of who the artist is. You would want them to be prepped on knowing that, hey, in this song they have trumpet solos, in this song they have percussion solos. Please make sure you pick them up. You give them as much insight as so that they could enhance the show with lighting.
Controversial question. How's your hearing after all these years?
Oh, I'm sure I've heard some hearing, but you know what? I don't mix anymore. I just produce. There's a lot of younger cats who do this well, and I hire them. I'm sorry. I'm going to answer the boss for a second, okay?
Yeah.
Estoy en un interview, yo te llamo para atrás, okay? So after all of this, if you want to go home and have a good meal, you got to answer the boss on the phone, okay?
So how did you protect your hearing?
I'm sure I've lost some hearing over the years. You have to be careful all times, and if you don't know this ahead of time, you can hurt your hearing. You can lose some, and it's inevitable. You're in a place where the sound pressures are very high, and unless you're walking around with plugs in your ears all the time, and then you pop them out to do the show, I'm from the old school. I'm a soldier. I went in there and I didn't use plugs, so I dealt with it.
What was the most stressful part of your job as a sound engineer?
I think the most stressful part would be artists who really were not prepared, because you want them to sound good, you want them to prevail in the show, but if they were not prepared and they really had their own hearing problems, that's stressful, because no matter what you do, that person already is impaired and really can't get where they want to go.
What was the most rewarding part of your job?
I think the most rewarding part of the job is when you hear that audience go, wow, that sounded great, and if you're doing your job well, because the audience would react. They will even tell you, I can't hear them. Yeah, they'll let you know. So that's the most rewarding thing, is knowing that you did a good job and people really felt it and loved it and danced. and they went home happy. They got their money's worth.
What made the Copa such a legendary venue?
I think what made the Copa such a legendary venue is that first of all, they had a head start. They had a name that was household all over the world, the world's most famous club, and they lived up to it. They got the best bands to perform there. They had great service. They were also a dinner club, you know. So and they also existed as a private events room. So you may have come into the club at 9 p.m. at night on a Friday, but there was already a private party that happened from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. that day. So they were able to do bar mitzvahs, all kind of things on a high end level. So it just wasn't the club that was bringing in the money; it was everything.
Gotcha. There were multiple revenue streams coming in.
Absolutely.
That actually brings me to the next question. Being involved with the club for 30 years, what insights would you have and what advice, how would you approach setting up a nightclub today? If I came to you and said, I want to set up a nightclub today, inspired by the Copa with some live music and some DJs,
Right.
what would you tell me?
Well,
And how
I
much
would.
should I budget for sound?
you, should, you should always go all out for sound. Sound is a thing where it's got to be right. You know, it's got to be right. It's got to be the latest and greatest stuff. If you don't do that, it's like you got the wrong engine in the race car.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love for there to be another Copacabana like it was before. It hasn't happened. Even the Copacabana that they do on Saturdays can't compare to that. There are certain things that just can't be reincarnated. It's a time, it's a space, and there are people and a happening that happens that just doesn't replicate. I would love for someone to put together, a Latin club that would bring in the top artists and reenact that. But truly, it's going to be hard. There are other places in the world where this music is even hotter. Colombia, Peru, where you see major concerts going on, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people backing this stuff. When people ask me about what happened to Southside, I say, well, there was a hub here in New York where the greatest came here to perform. And that hub blew up and created specs all over the world. And some of these specs have cultivated into some nice things. So what was concentrated here is now all over the world. And to see that come back and be the hub that it was, I would love for that to happen, really.
Mm. Knowing what you know now, how would you approach your career as a sound engineer differently?
I would have educated myself more. There's a lot of education behind being an audio engineer. I come from the old school of hard knocks. I learned on the spot. I didn't go to a school. I didn't learn the theory of this. I learned on the job. And so there is a theory to this. There is, things you should know before you go forward. And I would tell any young engineer, do that. Learn all that and get on it and don't just think that you're going to learn it on the job. Study what's out there. Study the new microphones and new consoles. Go to these seminars. Go to all this stuff that you need to go to from all these products to be able to really, come into a venue and say, I got this. I know this. Let's go.
Mm. So the Copa closed. What did you do next?
It was funny because the Copa closed because of COVID.
Wow.
Yeah, it closed because of COVID. They were down those couple of years, and they couldn't bounce back. They had lost all that revenue, and they had to pull out from where they were. And so, luckily for me, the Copa was not my only thing. In the last Copa, I actually started it and signed off. And they couldn't believe it. They said, "You mean you're not going to be here with us?" I said, "No, I cannot do this anymore." I had went to so many years of losing New Year's Eve with the family and all those holidays that it was time to say, "Okay, I'm going to set you up. You're going to be okay, but I'm not going to be here in the trenches with you every night. It just no longer, I can no longer do this." And lucky for me, the Copa was not the only thing I did. As I told youngsters, in my rule of 24/7, that was my night job. you know, During the day, I ran a production company, had rentals going out, I had all kind of things going on. So, yeah, yeah, it was, most of my days were 16 and 20-hour days, you know, in order to make everything work.
Wow. Wow. So in a way, it's a good thing you set yourself up so that way, even if the Copa closed, you didn't want to do it anymore, you were fine regardless.
Thank God, yes, Copa closed. Um, I have my production company. I've been producing events for different people for many years, for different organizations for many years. And of course, I'm grateful for that. I kept that going throughout all of this. The Copa was was very important to me. The entire club scene was important to me because it gave you income that was was extra income to something else that you might have had established already. It was a hustle. It was hard, okay, but it was real. And if you knew how to hustle and knew how to keep in there, you were rewarded, you know, because folks like the Copacabana were very loyal. They kept me for all those years, and they knew that whatever I asked for, they'll give me because they knew that I would make it happen. And so those kind of relationships are really hard to find today, where regardless, you know, these folks are loyal and they look for you like a family member to make it happen.
Mm. For your production company, any productions, events, or people that we would know?
Well, I grew a niche in the production world. I produce events for unions. I produce events for politicians. Okay, I always say I was saved by the unions because I was about to kill a promoter who was cheating me. I had enough of this. I like the next guy who cheats me out of my money, I'm gonna put a hole in his head. But here comes a union and says, "Listen, we like what you do. Can you do this for us?" And I've been doing that for them for many, many years now. Yeah. I produce events for unions like 1199, which is the Health and Hospital Workers Union, the United Federation of Teachers. I have Local 32 BJ for all the janitors and stuff like that. So 1199 started me off around 30 years ago as well, and it spread amongst other unions, and the politicians caught on too. I did all of Governor Cuomo's. If you remember during COVID, when he sat at the table and whatever, that was all me. I,
Wow.
right through COVID. Yeah, we risk our lives to be out there with this guy, and he was no joke.
Wow. Speaking of promoters, uh, school people on game, how do promoters try to get over on you? And what can people do to get ahead of it? How do they try to teach you? What are the games they play?
Yeah, I don't know what games they're playing today, but I can tell you, back then there
Yeah,
were
back then.
promoters. Yeah, there were promoters of all levels.
Mhm.
There were promoters who had a club, and they would tell you, "Hey, help me bring a sound system over here for $500," and they'd tell you, "Oh, kid, I only have $200 at the end of the night." Things like that. They say, "Put a sound system in here. I need this, this, and this. How much is that?" "Well, it's about $3,000." "Okay, I'll pay you off as weeks go on." You never saw it.
Wow.
Yeah, I went through all of that. Yeah, sure.
Wow. What's next?
What's next is thank God I have a production company which is alive and kicking. Um, it is not the same world as before. I would say things go up and down all the time, but I'm still alive. I'm still doing things. My next three jobs are the 21st, Local 32 BJ. They're doing a rally outside of Bronx Courthouse for whatever contract that is expiring for them. The very next day, I have 1199. They're doing a nationwide piece on Medicaid, you know, and how important that is to keep that going. So they're sending a message out to the governor about that. That's on the 22nd. And on the 25th, I have an event that I do every year called the Triangle Fire Memorial. This is an event that happened in 1917 where like 26 people died in a shirtwaist factory. And people had to jump out the windows and died because there was no unions to protect them back there or anything like that. So we do this event every year. It's pretty important.
Awesome. And then last, or a couple of more questions. What do you want your legacy to be?
You know, I think when people ask me, people say, "Oh man, you're like," I said, no, I'm not the legend. Okay, I had the honor of working for legends, and so if my legacy, if anything, is this, I just like to be quoted that I had the honor.
Mm, I love that. And then the last question: if people want to book you,
Mm-hmm.
what's the website, or how do they book you for sound
Yeah,
production?
go to Kevin at CPI Events. CPI Events is what we put out there on the internet. Um, I'm located in Astoria, Queens. I'm right in the city here, and we produce events, and we also provide equipment. So I like to refer to myself as a producer with toys. It's not like you got to go to a rental outfit and hire a producer and blah blah blah. We're all in house. We can do everything from soup to nuts.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for doing what you do. It's very important, man.
All right, take care. Have a good night.
You too now.
All right, bye-bye.